English referees going to be on duty at the Euros. This is just into us here. Michael Oliver is one of 2 English referees who will officiate at the Euros. Of course, Anthony Taylor is the other. I wonder what Mourinho thinks of that. Anthony Taylor is one of 2 English referees. And working on VAR, Stuart Attwell. Stuart Attwell will be working on VAR duty at the Euros come the summer. Well, in a few weeks from now. And of course, England in the Euros, Scotland in the Euros. The 2 referees, Anthony Taylor and Michael Oliver, and Stuart Attwell
I tell you
on
what,
VAR.
We don't want Stuart Attwell on VAR if Greece are playing, because Marinakis will spontaneously combust, won't he?
That's a great observation. One has to think, though, Simon, obviously logic tells me that Stuart Attwell has been chosen because he's pretty darn good when it comes to operating in the VAR truck.
Or maybe he's the best of a bad bunch by other people's qualification. Look, we all have our view on the decisions. No one can say that all 3 of those decisions covered the VAR official in glory, certainly not the third one. The other 2 we can debate.
What, Goodison?
Yeah, so as soon as would have his views, but Danny Murphy had another view, so there shows you the subjectivity of it all.
Right.
But the third one, I think everyone's alighted upon that should have been a penalty. And so when we talk about competency, this argument should be about competency. What Nottingham Forest have made it about is about corruption.
Well, I mean, for those who don't know, Stuart Attwell was on VAR duty at the weekend in that game at Goodison, which Everton won against Nottingham Forest. Since then, there has been an enormous fallout from that match because Forest had, in their eyes, 3 legitimate penalty claims, all turned down, and they insist that Stuart Attwell is a Luton fan and flagged that up before the game was played. But it's our understanding, and we have been at pains to stress this, even although their referee analyst Mark Clattenburg got in touch with Howard Webb prior to the game. It's our understanding here, and I said it yesterday and I'll say it again today, Forest did not ask for Attwell to be removed from the fixture as they had no issue at the time. So if they had a big issue at the time, why didn't they flag it up at the time? It appears they didn't have an issue at the time, but thereafter, after the match, following these 3 unsuccessful penalty claims, of course, all hell has broken loose. Simon, this is very much a story of statements from Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The first statement from Forest, straight after the game at the weekend, a game which Everton won, was suggesting to us they're concerned that Attwell was a Luton fan. They didn't name him, if memory serves me right, from that statement. They said that the individual on VAR is a Luton fan. But then in their third statement yesterday, we know match officials do not allow outside factors to influence their decision making. So what's your problem, Nottingham Forest? I mean, Simon, do you see that line? We know match officials do not allow outside factors to influence their decision making. Well, if you know that, then there's no problem, is there?
Well, this is Forest thinking post their original statement about how to manifest a direction of travel that doesn't allow them to be caught in the crosshairs of the observations they made in the first one, because it is slightly conflicting information. But they then go on to say, for whatever reason they feel they need to, that however it's clear PGMO must amend its rule on allegiances to account for contextual rivalries in the league table. So on one hand they're saying...
Do you agree with that?
Well,
because of alleged allegiances, the PGMOL are going to have to...
But it's the same thing, dressed up in a different guise.
About the rules.
On one hand, you're saying that we know that match officials don't have these allegiances and it doesn't affect the decision-making process. And the next thing you're saying it possibly could. So let's remove any... What they're saying there, let's remove any debate. Let's remove... It's like multi-club ownership, isn't it? My view is multi-club ownership is problematic because it creates some of the problems that it was originally outlawed from doing and now does, which is clubs being able to sell players to one another and creating a rigged marketplace. Yeah. A bit of gerrymandering going on in football. So you think of that in that respect. So what the argument would be is get rid of multi-club ownership, then you have no debate about it. So what they're saying is, and they're softening their message, they're saying on one hand, no, we weren't having a go at this fella. We're not suggesting that he has any allegiances, his behaviour is inappropriate, and we're rowing back from the idea that we were really flagging, which is we think there is. And now we're going to dress it up but to avoid any doubt going forward, us reasonable folk at Forest suggest that they'd be better served making sure that this doesn't become a question. So so the PGMOL's response will be, well, thank you very much. We've already considered that. Thank you for your help and your insight and your wonderful thought processes, but we've already factored that into our thinking. Because what we really didn't want to do is we didn't want to get a rabid, deluded football fan of a particular football club officiating a game. We've already considered that. Thanks very much. Off you go.
Right. The next stage in the proceedings is...
or they should say that.
Forest have asked the PGMOL to release the audio from those penalty moments, those penalty claim moments in the game against Everton at Goodison.
Yeah.
Penalty not given, penalty not given, penalty not given. So that's where they want to hear, and they want to hear the exchange, obviously involving Attwell and the match referee. Now, it's hard to think that the PGMOL will not release the audio, because they released the audio regards the Luis Diaz goal that was ruled out for Liverpool against Tottenham.
But that was clearly a systemic failure. This is not necessarily a systemic failure. This is human error on the part of a subjective decision.
But it set a precedent.
Well, it set a precedent of releasing audio on the basis of clear systemic failure. It was clear, the PGML knew it was clear that ultimately one person had heard something completely different from the pitch, and the communication was different. Now, I'm not averse, and it is becoming more of an apparent thing to me, which is moving into your camp, about the transparency of communication in the football world, because we've opened this Pandora's box now of VAR. We've implemented a version of it which isn't good enough, and we've created a problem. So it might be better to give transparency. The problem is, I'm not sure that people at Nottingham Forest should be able to throw their weight around the way they are and get what they want when they want it as a result of it, because then you create a precedent that every single time a club doesn't like something, because it's one thing an emotive, ranting, deranged manager after a game having his say. It's another thing the football club coming in behind, like the Arsenal did with Arteta, and like Nottingham Forest have done on this instance, demanding, banging their hand on the table saying, we demand this, and we can say what we want about whoever we want without any consequence. So I'm not adverse for the transparency side of things, for the PGMOL to go, right, you have this. Now, but by the way, when it turns out that there was a legitimate decision-making process and the reasons why were quite clear, we want you also to be able to, on the front foot about saying that. You might not like the decisions, but we actually understand the process. It's the balance, Jim, between giving someone what they think they're entitled to, when they think they're entitled to it, and how they ask and what they get from it, against setting precedents for every football club. Every single time a bleeding corner's given that they don't like, they can ask for audio.
I agree with that, but Liverpool on social media, if memory serves me right, requested the audio be released on the Diaz goal, and they released it. So there is a precedent set here, Simon. So Forest are pushing for that. The PGMOL have no choice. Release it.
But granted,
let's hear it.
But granted, but and it may well be because first and foremost, the PGMOL. What did the PGMOL come out and do before Liverpool asked for the audio? They copped to the mistake.
Yeah.
They made an apology. So that made the Liverpool position even more strident, because they didn't want to hear the audio, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that no one in VAR has said they've made an error. And if they have made an error, it was an error of judgment which happens in football. There wasn't an error of judgment which happened in football for the Tottenham-Liverpool game. There was a systemic failing in the communication. That's a different methodology, and that's a different set of parameters to judge it by.
Everton won the game by 2-0. Forest took nothing from it. I do continue to wonder if Forest had won that game, would we be hearing such a stink? I'm not so sure. Darryl is a big Nottingham Forest fan. Darryl, good morning. I'm glad you've come on to speak to us, mate. You know, quite a bit of time has elapsed now since the match and since the start of the series of statements. Where are you with it all?
Morning, guys.
Morning.
I'm going to go against the grain. All I'm seeing from the mainstream media and outlets like yourselves and Rigger and Neville is lambasting of the club for the statement. Now, I understand that it's quite a strong statement and it's something that's not happened before, but it needed to. The only people that aren't supporting Forest through this are the mainstream outlets. People aren't reading the room on this one. If you actually look through the comments, under the videos, etc., the vast and overwhelming support from other supporters is in favour of what Forest have done. People have got sick and tired of this. VAR has just become an absolute joke within itself. The statement regarding Stuart Attwell, Forest have been lambasted for saying, well, there seems to be some kind of bias, etc. But the de facto point on this is that the PGMOL themselves, at the start of the season, require you to submit which team you support, etc. So in that themselves, they are saying that there is a potential for conflict and bias by their very own process. So why is it an issue for Forest to point that out, but not for the PGMOL through their processes at the beginning of the season?
Do you want to address that, Simon?
Well, first of all, I think that's nonsense what you've just said about the mainstream media, because I've been a major advocate of defending Nottingham Forest against the point sanction they got, and I think it's appropriate to question things. I don't think anybody gets the right to allege corruption about an individual. You can allege lack of competency, but Nottingham Forest didn't allege that. They alleged corruption and bias.
No, Simon, right? This is about bias.
Yeah, but that is by definition a form of corruption, because you're suggesting that your decision-making process is artificially influenced by an outside factor, and none of us at this moment in time, not you and not me, and I haven't finished, Dale. I'll listen to you.
If you're saying bias,
Dale, I hadn't finished.
By definition, corruption. Graham Souness intimated that himself yesterday.
But Graham Souness is not in a position of influence over a football match. He's a pundit on a radio show, so it's not the same thing. Right? It's about influence that you have in positions of influence. Now, Nottingham Forest are in the cart because of your bad management last year over financial affairs, which puts you into a relegation battle. You conceded a goal against Liverpool because of a bad decision, but your centre-forward decided to dribble it out of a box and concede a goal as a result of it. And now what you're doing is you're putting a statement out, not about competency. It's about corruption. In any other industry, the individual concerned, if it were the banking or the finance industry or anything else, would be able to sue for defamation. I think Forest have an absolute right to demand the reasons why these decisions went against them, but not the manner in which they've done it. And you can say, well, it needed hyperbole. It needed someone to say it. It needed someone to rally the troops against the incompetency of VAR. Your manager talked about conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories. Who are the co-conspirators? We knew who the gunpowder plot conspirators were. Who are the conspirators that are trying to do Nottingham Forest up then?
Come off it, Simon. I think we all know that's a little bit lost in translation.
It's not. Conspiracy theory. Your manager said conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but as we know...
By whom? Who are the conspirators?
No, he's Portuguese. No, we're not agreeing with that. He's Portuguese, Simon. Come off it. I think we know he's a little bit clumsy.
Oh, okay. So I think Nuno Espirito Santo knows what he's saying and the reasons why he's saying it. But your main point is that Forest and the mainstream media, whoever it is that you think are the mainstream media, are advocating for the establishment to be protected, and that is a load of old cobblers.
Well, that's all we've heard from you.
No, you haven't. You've heard me turn around and say Nottingham Forest have a right to ask a question.
Dow, just before you go, do you want the audio released from the weekend?
Absolutely.
By the PGMOL. So to show that we don't take one side as opposed to the other, just before we came on air, we put in numerous calls to the PGMOL trying to establish whether or not they're going to release the audio today, so that you and others like you, Darryl, will find out that the audio is going to be released or it's not going to be released. We're not sitting in our hands here, mate.
Because obviously you having the access to the audio is obviously views for yourselves, Jim. But on the other thing,
views for us. That's what you're talking about. Journalistically, we're trying to find out if they're going to release the audio. Do you understand me?
To ask for the referee to be removed, because I keep hearing you peddling that one. You keep saying we didn't ask for the referee to be removed, and there wasn't an issue.
But that's what the PGMO have said.
They're not allowed to ask for the referee to be removed.
But we didn't say that. All we said was that Clattenburg got in touch with Howard Webb before the game to discuss the situation around Attwell. We then established from within the PGMOL that Clattenburg and Forest did not ask for Attwell to be removed from the fixture, and they had no issue pre-match with Attwell being on VAR.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.